Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our first Meet the Author with Dr. Tiffany Jana. I hope I said the last name right, Tiffany.
You did.
Okay, great. Um, okay, so we'll start this call by introducing the sponsors of this event today. So we have today actually we are presenting this talk by the 10KSP Alumni Book Club, and I'll explain to you in a second what that is. It's a mouthful. So let's see. Okay, so the first thing that we have is let's talk about the agenda. So we're going to, as I said, we're going to talk about the sponsors first. Then we will talk about, we will basically introduce Dr. Tiffany Jana, and she will tell us about her latest book and her other books and the great work that she's been doing. And then we will have a question and answer session. So if anyone has any questions, please note them down. You can also chat them to us, and then we'll answer them at the end. So let's begin. Let's talk about the sponsors. So the first sponsor is the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business. We call it 10KSB program. What that program is, it's to train small business leaders and provide them with training and support, because a small business owner or a small business leader is a very lonely job. You're at the top and you are trying to figure out everything, what to do, how to do, and how to guide the team that you have and serve the customers and all that. And it gets pretty lonely up there. So Goldman Sachs has started this 10,000 small business program that helps small business leaders and provides them training and provides them and basically takes away that lonely space and provides them with a lot of resources and skills to be able to do their jobs better and have actually a better life doing it. So it basically links the small business, their actions with their learning, and helps them gain very important skills in like negotiations, marketing, employee management, even getting a loan, how to pitch your business, and all kinds of different things that help an entrepreneur do a better job with their business. It's actually conducted in 20 different cities all over the US, and several hundred entrepreneurs are trained every year. And in fact, we've already reached or almost reached the 10,000 number. So it's a really, really great program. If you're interested, the link is 10ksbapply.com, pretty easy. Okay, so the second sponsor, of course, part of the 10KSB program is our Alumni Book Club. What we've done is, since we have over 10,000 alumni already in the program, we've created a book club on Facebook where over 500 alumni are already in the club and more are adding every day. So basically what we do is we get together and we read books that help us in our business lives, and we discuss those books, and then we also share books, whatever we read. If we think it's good for other alumni to be aware of, we share those books and talk about them. So again, to learn and grow together is the goal. If you are an alumni of 10KSB and you're not part of the book club, please go to Facebook and look for 10KSB Alumni Book Club and join, okay? Then the last of the sponsors is myself, is Alicom Business Solutions. This is the business that I own, and I've owned it for 20 years and I run. Basically, we are CRM consultants and we are CRM experts. We've been in, as I said, in this space for 20 years almost. We are experts at taking a business needs and finding or creating solutions that fit that need and not the other way around, okay? We are experts at looking at a situation and designing and customizing specific solutions for them using different market-based CRMs right now. We also do user trainings. We write API integration. So basically, we do everything that is needed for a CRM's implementation to be successful. If you're interested in learning more, you can go to our website. It's very easy, makecustomersforlife.com. And that's our main philosophy. And we actually, our own customers stay with us for a very long time. Our average customer retention period is 10 years. So, we make customers for life. We teach and help support other businesses to make customers for life. So now let's give it to Dr. Tiffany Jana. Tiffany, I'm going to let you take it away. And I think your video is yes, it is online. Okay, go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I was going to be a member of the 10,000 Small Business Network. I applied, I got in, I was all excited, but things got away from me, so I haven't been able to go through the program yet, but I understand from my friends who've been through that it's fantastic. So yes, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I have just released my 4th book. I will go through each of them. My first book was Overcoming Bias, Building Authentic Relationships Across Differences, and that was an independent study identifying your own biases and then working through them. My second book was Erasing Institutional Bias. So if you're willing to accept that people are biased, then so are the systems that we build. And so that was designed to help the individual identify what are the biases within the system, and then how do I, as just one person, actually affect a change on the biases within my organization. And that's whether you're an individual contributor or a leader. And obviously, as leaders have an outsized ability to influence the systems in the organization. My third book was the 2nd edition of the B Corp Handbook. I was actually a case study in the first edition, and then Ryan Honeyman, the first author on this, invited me to rewrite the book from the perspective of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so now it looks at the B Corp sector, the social enterprise sector, and we're scaling up these values of diversity, equity, and inclusion to a global economic scale. So if you are the proprietor of a business, how do you consider inclusion at a global economic scale? How do you consider the way that you build your company to be intentionally inclusive of the marginalized communities, the environment, the population, etc.? So that was an amazing book to read. Instant bestseller, that one was. And then the book that just came out on March 10th is Subtle Acts of Exclusion, How to Understand, Identify, and Stop Microaggressions. And I wrote that one with Michael Barron. And so Subtle Acts of Exclusion is what we're here to talk about today. And it's interesting. I chose that title because it's about microaggressions. And for those of you who are, not aware or trying to figure out what microaggressions are, they're called micro because they're, it's intended to communicate that it's a small aggression, a small infraction. But the reality of microaggressions is that if you're the person on the receiving end, it might not feel so small. And depending on the identities that you occupy, I happen to represent 5 intersectional identities, right? So I'm African American, I'm a gender minority, I present female, but I'm actually non-binary, LGBT, invisibly disabled, right? So I stack all these things on top of each other. And when you think about the myriad different ways that people marginalize in very small ways, people with different identities, you can be a majority identities and be microaggressed on a regular basis. Those things add up and they just feel toxic, right? And so the first thing that we wanted to do, Michael and I as authors, was to rebrand the term microaggressions as subtle acts of exclusion. Because like the term racist, right? If I call someone a racist, they're not going to say, "Thank you, Dr. Jana. Thank you for calling me a racist. Can you please tell me more about that? I'd like to learn from this place." The same thing goes with microaggression. As soon as you name it for that term, it puts people on the defensive. It doesn't put anyone in a space to want to receive, to learn, to grow. And also there's nothing, the second title we considered was there's nothing micro about microaggressions. It's called micro, but it's not, the impact that it has can actually be really damaging. So they may be subtle words or subtle choices, subtle actions, but they serve to exclude people, right? And so SAE is what we call it for short, SAE, subtle acts of exclusion. And that was the first thing that we moved into. Like all of my books, the way that I've approached subtle acts of exclusion is I want anyone to be able to pick up this book and be able to immediately begin to think differently, act differently, and really implement these things in the larger world. Organizational development is the space that I occupy. So I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner. I've been doing the work for 20 years. The organizations and institutions are the learning lab that I've chosen to focus on. But these are all lessons that work outside in your regular real life as well. It's not just organizational stuff. But the way that subtle acts of exclusion is written, it's written from multiple perspectives. One, the perspective of the individual. How can I, as just a person, begin to interrogate my own motives, behaviors, actions, the agreements I've made with myself, and make better choices that are less harmful to people? How do I respond if someone has committed one of these subtle acts of exclusion against me? How do I respond in the moment? How do I respond as a bystander, right? What if I see, if I'm a witness or a bystander, I don't do anything. What we actually want people to be is co-conspirators, right? We want people to actually do something, and it provides guidance for what to do in those moments. And then it also provides guidance if you happen to be the unfortunate initiator. Okay. So what do you do if, most of the time when these things happen, people aren't actually trying to cause harm. Right. So when someone says, oh my gosh, Tiffany, I don't really think of you as a Black person, right? They're trying to compliment me.
Yes.
or Dr. Jana, I don't see color. I understand what you're saying, but that's actually offensive, right? So what do you do if someone has made you aware of the fact that you have committed one of these? Our initial response is going to be to go straight into the reptilian brain and be useless to logic, useless to input. And so we provide guidance for that. The other perspective that we provide guidance for is for the facilitator, right? The team leader, the person who's in charge of a group dynamic, a room full of people. What do you do when you are, you're at the whiteboard with the marker and you're guiding people through a group process, and you experience or witness a subtle act of exclusion in real time in front of a bunch of people, and you're supposed to be the authority who, probably through the norms that you established at the beginning of the session, you're supposed to be the person that keeps people safe, right? But the challenge with subtle acts of exclusion is that they are so subtle, most of us are paralyzed to act when we see them, right? Because it's like, that didn't feel right, but maybe it's not that big a deal, but ooh, should I say anything? I don't want to ruin the dynamic.
Yeah.
Right? And then the final perspective is the leadership perspective. So, what we want to do is normalize the behavior that is inclusive. What we want to do is we want to provide our teams with the skills and the tools that they need to be able to navigate these conversations, with grace, with elegance, with aplomb. But they're skills. They need to be navigated. People need to understand that. And so what we've created is an SAE, subtle acts of exclusion, SAE accountability system. So if an organization takes this on, like all of my books are written so that you can either read them as an individual, or as a leader, you can buy them for the group, the team, the organization, and you can kind of go through the kind of book club process together. And what happens is that with the SAE accountability system, the organization is making the agreement to, are you still there?
I am here. I'm here. I'm
Okay,
actually,
great.
yes, I am actually trying to navigate. I messed up something. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries,
Go
no
ahead.
worries. So what it does is, with the SAE accountability system, what the organization does is it says, we are trying to be intentionally inclusive. We are trying to create a sense of belonging for everyone. And we want to normalize speaking out when these things happen. We're no longer going to sit around and just let it be acceptable and okay that people cause each other harm in these small ways all day, every day, and we just say nothing. So an SAE accountability system allows the organization to be intentional about providing people with the tools they need to intervene in those moments so that everyone has an opportunity to feel safe and feel welcome in the environment and empowered to speak up when, Catherine Catherine puts out 3 really great ideas, everyone ignores her, and then John regurgitates her idea, and everyone thinks John's a genius after Catherine's been shut down, spoken over, and her ideas have been ignored. If you have an SAE accountability system, then you have the invitation and the skills to interrupt things and say, hey, John, that's a really great idea. I think that's what Catherine was trying to say, right? So Catherine doesn't
Yes.
always have to be the one to speak up for herself. We should
Mm-hmm.
be empowered to speak up for each other.
Yes, that's great. That's you just put me in so many meeting rooms in like last 5 minutes that I have been in over the last few years,
Yeah.
and you're absolutely right. You don't know what to say.
No, that's the nature of these things, is that depending on the context you're in, there's always a power dynamic that you're managing, right? So if you're
Mm-hmm.
in a room and if you're at a round table and your CEO is in the room, like, no one's going to want to misbehave in front of the CEO. You certainly don't want to call out the CEO, but you don't even want to be seen as the troublemaker who's saying the thing, which is why with the SAE accountability system, the organization is essentially giving permission for people to handle these things with care and with grace. Like, the first thing is, we want to separate intent from impact. The very first thing people do when they've been called out, or they've, or their behavior is being reflected back at them, is that they fall into the defensive place of, well, I didn't mean it that way. It's
Mm-hmm.
your fault because you took it wrong. I was actually trying to pay you a compliment. That was not my intention. We need to recognize that your intention versus the impact it has on a person, those things are not related, right? So
Yes.
one of the first things we have to do is like drop out of the defensiveness and recognize someone, an actual human being, is either telling you that they're in pain, or someone is telling you about some pain that you've caused in someone else. And we have to remove our own feelings and sensitivity in that moment and think about that other person and recognize that it's real. That impact is real, and we have zero right to tell someone that what they're feeling and experiencing is invalid.
And that happens so many times in real world, in everyday situations. That just happens so many times. um with me, what happens is I don't think, when I hear you speaking, um and even when I was reviewing your book, I was feeling like I really need to do a lot of work on myself to basically recognize when I do that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because when people do it to me, of course, that's, I am so always uh, on the alert and on defensive for something like that. But I think what has happened is it has made me um, not sensitive to, I don't pay as much attention to what I'm doing. Like you said, we're thinking that hey, we are not doing that. I am, and I'm sure I am. So that's the part that you were talking about, is, I think, at least in my case, I think there's more, because it's very easy for me to recognize when somebody does that to me,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
But as I've done work on myself, I have realized that the best transformation for me in my behavior comes when I internalize something that I am doing myself wrong, and
Mm-hmm.
I get sensitive about that. Then when somebody else does that same thing or similar thing wrong,
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to be calm about it and able to handle it with more care and less anxiety and less, reptilian brain behavior.
Right.
Um, because I think it feels familiar. It starts feeling familiar instead of being the bad thing,
Mm-hmm.
So can you speak to that a little bit more about, how do we go about catching our own selves and correcting?
So all work in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion must necessarily start with the individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it has to start with us. And so I think that the screen is on you right now. I don't think that the viewers can see me speaking. I don't know if you can change that or not.
Okay, let me see if I can. Yes,
Sure.
something.
I'll just keep talking. Um, so yeah,
Tell
so the
me,
work.
is this better?
No, it's you're the only one on the screen. I'm not
Okay,
sure.
let's see. Unpinned. I'll spotlight you and see if that.
No, yeah, I'm not sure why it's doing that. Um, in any case, yeah, so the work that you do around diversity, equity, and inclusion always has to start with a self-examination. And so that's better, that's working.
Okay,
And so
perfect.
if you start with, starting with yourself, again, you nailed it. When these things happen to you, we're keenly aware of them. When it's happening, when we're the initiators, we move into the defensiveness and we're not able to see our own, our own wrongdoing. So one of the sort of antidotes to that is to listen, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're actually getting plenty of information about how we're showing up in the world.
Mm-hmm.
We just choose not to listen because it's not favorable data. It's not data that we want to be processing, right? And so what we've got to do is we've got to make a new agreement with ourselves that we're going to listen when
Mm-hmm.
people give us that feedback. We have to be humble enough to recognize that sometimes we're going to be wrong, that sometimes we are going to cause harm, and be aware of the fact, like, it just like with unconscious bias has been a hot topic lately, right? And so a lot of times subtle acts of exclusion are actually correlate really neatly with our unconscious biases. The nature of unconscious bias is that it's exactly that. It's something you're not conscious of. It is part of the functioning of the human brain. We make rapid decisions, we make shortcuts, we rely on, stereotypes and patterns, and when we overlay those onto people and cultures, it creates problems. And so being willing to be open enough to receive that information is really useful. And then the other thing is to be willing to kind of do that work of figuring out what are the biases that you have. What are the generalizations that you make about people? Are you talking about this person specifically, or are you talking about some kind of racial or gender or sexual orientation pattern that you think you've observed? Are you overlaying something
Mm-hmm.
on top of a whole group of people? Or
Mm-hmm.
are you allowing this beautiful spirit in front of you to be who they are and to shine and bring themselves to the table? So it really, there's a lot of self-interrogation, and that's the perspective from which my books are written, is like, what are the questions that we need to ask ourselves about what we think about the people around us? Because a lot of times these aren't things that we decided. Like, a lot of people didn't wake up one day and decide, hey, I'm gonna be a racist, right? There's a
Mm-hmm.
series of messages and programs over time that have caused people to believe what they believe. And these messages often came from very trusted sources, right? This was your
Exactly.
parents, this was your teachers, this was your clergy, this was the resources, the news, the books, the whatever it is that you were reading and consuming that created this, this diorama of data that made you believe that something is true. So particularly as fully functioning adults, we have a responsibility to figure out, what are those things that we believe? Do we still believe them? Are they useful? Where did those beliefs come from? And when you're a leader and you are in the position to hire people, fire people, promote people, give job assignments to people, then I don't believe you even have a choice. So it's like, if you identify as a good person, or you're trying to be a good person, and or you actually can affect people's livelihoods, then you have a responsibility to understand where your biases might be and where you might be subtly or not so subtly excluding people because you happen to have power.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, those words were, those last words were very powerful. Yeah.
I mean, it's scary. I mean, it's scary to think that, you know, most of us are moving through the world thinking, yeah, I'm a pretty good person, right? I'm trying to do good, doing my thing. And one of the hardest things for people to do in general, but certainly as leaders, is to see ourselves the way that other people see us, right? We don't
Mm-hmm.
actually, like, what we believe, how we believe we come across, and how we believe we're impacting people versus what's actually happening. Those things are often like not related at all, right? We have these big delusions about how we show up. But if we are willing to open up our ears and listen and pay attention to the data that we're getting, we'll often find things that we don't want to hear, but that's the stuff we need to be paying attention to.
You know, this is funny. I was listening to a recording, an interview with Malcolm Gladwell. It's one of my
Mm-hmm.
favorite authors.
Love him.
And
Yes.
yeah, and he was saying, he said, entrepreneurs are the most delusional people in the
Oh,
world.
yes. It's
And
true.
he's so absolutely right.
Yeah.
So yes, you exactly. So, you know, because we have to be delusional to be
We,
able to wake up
to
every day.
succeed.
Exactly.
Yes.
And wake up every
Yes.
day and do this, you know, and actually do this and think, oh, okay, you know, I'm doing great. And so it's
Yeah.
the things that you're talking about are even a bigger challenge for us because of that, you know, that pseudo world that we have to create. But within that world, if we can, um, we should, for sure, we should add this awareness. Let's see if anyone wants to. Is there anyone has any questions? Lori, I see a number 267. I don't know who this person is, but I can unmute. You can unmute yourself, or you can send a chat question. So I don't want to unmute
Can you
them.
hear me? This is Lori.
Yes.
Lori,
Hi, Lori.
Hi. So I'm curious, for organizations that you consult with or work with, like, what do you think, what do they do for an organization that would um, learn well and maybe implement some of the things that you're talking about and do that in a healthy way organizationally?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think are the things that they're doing first, like before you even get involved? Like, I'm trying to picture, what would it look like for me to introduce either your book
Mm-hmm.
or some of your other materials to my team? Like, are
Mm-hmm.
there things, how does that conversation normally start in a way that's received well?
So are you in a leadership position?
Yeah, so I own a company. We're a team of 19.
Great. So that is the most important thing, because there are three things guaranteed to make any kind of like diversity focused anything fail. One is insufficient buy-in from the top. So the fact that you are in leadership and that you are proposing some kind of focus on this is a step in the right direction. The second is the failure to identify clear measurable goals. So you need to be able to articulate clearly what it is that you're after. What are you trying to accomplish? What does success look like at the end of this road that you're embarking on? If you don't identify clear measurable goals, then you'll never know if you were actually successful. And then it's just kind of wishy-washy, like you just threw something out there because it was maybe popular, it seemed like the right thing to do. Don't throw spaghetti at walls. Know what you're after. And then the third one is the failure to embed accountability, right? So if, for instance, you started with this book and said, you know what, microaggressions are a thing, and we would like for them to be less of a thing with our group. We'd like to be more culturally fluent and address these things well. Then what you would do is you'd have people, we'd read the book together, we'd have, book club, have some conversations, and your goal would be to embed this SAE accountability system into the culture, and the accountability is actually built in. And the idea is, like, none of us wants to have the yucky stuff that lands on the front page news where we got the EEO thing wrong, right? So what you want to do is you want to skill people up in such a way that we can have these conversations and we can talk it out and deal with each other with grace, and form relationships and have cultural fluency. So SAE accountability system provides you with those tools to be able to say, look, we're a small team. We're a team of 19. It's small, but that's you're at a point where that's a tipping point, right? You get over 20, it's a whole new organization. And so you say, look, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and make an agreement amongst ourselves that, one, we understand that people are going to get this wrong. right? People are going to mess up from time to time, but that's not going to destroy our relationships, and it's not going to destroy our culture. We're going to agree that when we see these things happen, we're going to have grace for each other, because there's not a single person in this organization who has never committed a microaggression. We've all done it, and we'll all do it again. But what we agree to do is have some grace in those moments and have permission to like call each other in. Instead of calling each other out, we call each other in, and use those as teachable moments. So you're doing the right thing by being the leader and saying, you know, I'm going to take this on. And the single most powerful thing that a leader can do to foster engagement and give the thing real legs is to model the behavior, right? So for you to be able to you know, pull somebody aside, like you don't start by, you know, calling it out in front of everybody, but you can pull somebody aside when you see something in a meeting that doesn't work, and you can say, hey, you know, this is not okay. Or when if somebody has the, you know, the thick skin to call you out on a microaggression, for you to be able to say, you know what, thank you for bringing that to my attention. I did not realize that you know, that what I said was, you know, was harmful, but, you know, I will work better to raise my awareness and do better next time. For you to have the humility to own all different sides of it, to intervene when needed, you know, to be humble and apologize when you're an initiator, and to provide people the skills they need to do better.
That's great. Thanks so much.
You're welcome so much.
Great. That was a good question.
Yeah.
Great. So I think we don't have anyone else coming. So here's one thing I
Sure.
messed up. I had actually done a really good job of the PowerPoint that I didn't get to show off. So if you don't mind, I'll
Go for
just,
it.
you know, go for it for a second. I think you're gonna laugh about it.
You're going to need to take the screen back though to do
Yeah,
it.
that's what I'm trying to do. It's,
Okay.
you know, I run an IT company and I am so nervous right now. I've used this platform so many times, but okay. So look at that. That's what I had done.
Oh, look at you. Thank
Do you
you.
see that screen?
Yes.
So, you know, I when I saw this picture on Amazon, I was like, okay, you know, that's exactly the spirit I'm getting from the book as I'm reading it. And I'm like, I've got to put this on. So
Oh, thank you.
just
Yeah,
everyone.
you know, I'm calling myself an awareness artist these days, and I define that as using any medium to create an embrace of people and culture wide enough to leave no one out. It's just, you know, love, joy. There is more than enough of this to go around, you know. And at the end of the day, if I have to like distill all of my books and all of the work that I do in organizations down to one core tenet, it's that we have lost that connection to our essential humanity. You know, when we are dealing with our family, our sister, our cousin, you know, our spouse, we have an incredible amount of patience for their shenanigans. Like they make us crazy, don't get me wrong, but you know, we don't just throw things away very easily when it comes to those relationships. But when we get to the workplace, it seems that we lose that connection to the narrative of the heart, you know, who people really are, and the fact that they need love and compassion and patience and grace as well. And if we could have a little bit more of that, like many of the things that I work on would be, you know, would not be nearly as necessary. And then our individual accountability to what we're adding to culture. Many of us don't think about what we're adding to any given context, culture, or community, but we're always adding something, whether we're conscious of it or not. And so what I want to do is raise people's vibration and raise their intention around who it is that they're showing up as, right? So thanks for finding that picture. That's a fun one. I'm always having fun with my hair.
And it's your smile. It's you
Yeah.
know, the energy that's coming out from that picture.
I was looking
Anyway.
at my mother, who is my inspiration. She's been doing this work for many more decades than me, and I have followed in her footsteps. And she was the person making me laugh on the other side of that.
Oh wow! Tell me a little bit more about her.
Yeah, my
Your
mother
mom is
was
an author too?
not an author yet. She's going to be, but she was a pioneer in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. She was She's a behavioral psychologist, and she was standing up offices of multicultural affairs in universities across the country.
Oh, wow.
And I followed around behind her when she was administering assessments, and she was, doing the work that she did. And when she officially stood up her company, she hired me to work with her, and then I spun off and did my own thing, and we still will contract and subcontract with each other. And actually book 5 we're actually writing together, she and I.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Yes.
That will be amazing. That'll be good too.
Well, it's going to be interesting because it's actually a multi-series television show that we're turning into a graphic novel. So I'm jumping genres, but still with the diversity theme. So everything that I've learned from her and with her and out in the world is being translated into different medium.
Is that the series that you did, the Life with Doc Jana, or is this a
No.
different series?
This will be something that's, out something that you can stream on a major network. So
Oh, okay.
that's to be announced later.
Oh, wow. Okay, great. We'll
Yes.
definitely wait for that. So I'm just
Awesome.
gonna put the important links here for anyone to get if they're interested. And I think we don't have any other questions. Is there anything else you want to share, Tiffany?
No, I've got everything. My middle schooler just walked in the door and is making all kinds of noise in the background.
I can totally get that.
So that might be my cue.
Yes. I'll let you go. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. This has
Awesome.
been a great learning situation. And, hopefully we'll invite you again because some of my members want to also hear about the B Corp book.
Yes.
And
Okay.
talk to you about that. So I'll gauge them and then get in touch with you once you're on the other side of promotions for the subtle acts.
Okay.
And you have had a chance to take a breather, and then we'll connect.
Well, that might be sooner than you think because I canceled my international book tour because of the coronavirus shenanigans. So
yeah.
I'm looking to do all kinds of virtual engagement these days.
Okay. So I'll get in touch with you tomorrow. Let's see. Let's put something on schedule. That's great. I'm always all
Perfect.
for taking, positive side of whatever is happening and just focusing on
Exactly.
the positive and see, what we can get out of while we are tackling something else. So
There we go. All right.
great.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Have a wonderful and blessed weekend.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Lori, for attending.
Thanks,
Bye.
Lori.